Hello and welcome to the Blow on the Cartridge podcast. This is episode 5. I'm your host today. My name is John, and I'm joined as usual by my good friends Sean, say hi,
Hello, John.
and Alex. How are you doing, sir?
Hi.
Excellent. We are joined here today to talk about games that were important to us in the past. And we have one here today that Alex is going to do us the great favor of introducing to us. So if you would do us the honor, please.
All right. Well, the game we're talking about today is a game that I think a lot of Americans can remember from their childhood. It was a game that was developed in the 1970s by a teacher and some of his friends, and that game is Persona 3. Wait, no, I'm sorry, I got that completely wrong. It's Oregon Trail. I'm sure we've all heard of that. Now, we were gonna do Persona 3, and we still are doing Persona 3. That said, it's a very, very long game, and we really wanted to give it the attention it deserves. So we went ahead with the pick I chose for after Persona 3, which was Oregon Trail. And I'm happy to say it is exactly as I remember it from my childhood. Oregon Trail was originally developed in the 1970s and was a printer game. So kids in the classroom would type in things into a computer that didn't have a screen. It would just print out something and they would read off the result of what they were doing. It was a totally text-based strategic game. It was picked up by the, I don't want to butcher the name, the Minnesota Educational Computing Consortium, and was delivered. I believe they partnered up with Apple, and it was released on the Apple II. It was sent out to schools across the country, along with all sorts of learning facilities. In the original Oregon Trail in 1985, as that game actually had a screen you could look at and actually had stuff you could do and have response on screen, no printout this time. And then it was released in various versions: second edition, third edition, deluxe edition, fourth edition, fifth edition. There was a sequel, there were spin-offs, there was Yukon Trail, there was Amazon Trail, all sorts of spin-offs and, extra versions of the game. For our show today, we played the Oregon Trail Deluxe that came out in 1992. That said, there are similar things all across the Oregon Trail. All the versions have very similar play style and a similar strategic curve to them. That said, I think we all had a great time playing it. Let's talk first about our experiences. So, John.
Yeah, as someone from the UK, I have heard of Oregon Trail from American podcasters that I've listened to, but I've never actually played the game before. So I figure some people in the UK might have played it because it was such a popular thing on the Apple II that some of us probably did play it over here, but if they did, I never made contact with anyone who had. So playing it this late on and having no light nostalgia or anything for it is actually. We're going to get into it, but it's interesting. I have some thoughts. Sean, what about you? How are you feeling about this?
Before I give my answer, so for those of you who haven't played this game in a long time, it's really, really short. I don't think I was expecting it to be as short. And I actually asked my mother and my brother, and they both remembered it being a whole lot longer. This is a 30-minute game. So I will start by saying I played it 4 times before this episode, and I'll talk about my experiences. But John, I want to hear, how many times did you play through it, and what were those experiences like?
I played twice. First time, everyone died apart from the me, because I named all the characters after people I know. And everyone died but me. And I made it about 80% of the way in and then drowned on a raft. Which is just because I've got no experience of it. I'm just is this just how it was? Is this what potential prospectors did when they went to America? They went on a on a raft somewhere and then they all just drowned. Okay. Stereotypical American history right there. The second time I understood a little bit more about the mechanics, and I made it all the way through, got on the raft, hit a rock inexplicably. I'm still saying there's some lag on the game or something like that because we played in a browser. That's my excuse, and I'm sticking to it. and 2 people drowned, and then I completed the game. It was just like, oh, okay. I played this in an afternoon. It was an interesting experience. I learned a few things about American geography, and I heard some very, very nice ditties being played to me when I made it to special places. Because there's some music in this game. Because, well, for the rest of the time, there's no music at all.
Nope.
But when you
Nope.
arrive at certain locations, you get music, and they're very sort of like historical pieces, shall we say? Anyway, Alex, did we talk about how your experiences with this game?
No, I'm sure my experience mirrors Sean's in that I played this as a kid, and I also remember being a lot longer, but as I told Sean, it's a lot different when you're using up your 30 minutes of computer time in Mr. Imland's class to try and get through as much of the game as you possibly can, but then also spending an inordinate amount of time slaughtering buffalo during the hunting game because, you're a kid, so of course you do.
Yeah.
Which is historically accurate. I can actually say, as a former educator, though, I have had this in my classroom. I actually put this version on my students' computers just for fun, and it was more of like a bonus activity. I think at one time I tried doing an activity, like an actual educational activity with it. Had nothing to do with teaching the Oregon Trail, though. I have one interesting story with this game, though, in that when I was in college, I worked the front desk somewhere, and it was a very do-nothing job. I literally sat in front of a computer, and they monitored what I would go onto on a browser, so I couldn't fool around too much on just going on random websites and stuff, because I was supposed to be being attentive and stuff. I never had to do anything. But I bring a flash drive, a bunch of MS-DOS games, and just play that on the computer. And I played this game a lot because, what the hell? I'll give it a shot. And that's when I realized, man, this game is nothing. There's nothing here. I shouldn't say nothing. It's a very short game, though. It's a lot less involved than I thought it was. That's also where I started working on getting a high score, which is totally dumb. But I worked on getting, world record high scores. And I found out if you get above 2,300 points or something like that, it'll roll over into the negatives. So you'll start seeing negative scores.
Oh, okay.
But for a very brief time in history, I was the world record holder for the highest score in Oregon Trail Deluxe. So
Wow.
Very proud of that.
Tell you what, let's assume that some of our audience is a bit like me and doesn't actually understand what it is that you're trying to do in the Oregon Trail. Do you want to maybe explain
Sure.
what's
So
happening?
the Oregon Trail, the teacher who designed it did base it off of diary entries from settlers. So the Oregon Trail was part of westward expansion. So it was a time in our country where Americans were moving out west because there was a lot of land that was uninhabited.
Yeah, for those of you listening, there's heavy quotation marks going on here when Alex says that.
So it was uninhabited land. So settlers, you were using prospectors. Settlers is probably what they would call themselves. They were settling the wild land out there. And that there was just so much of it to go around. So the Oregon Trail was part of that. It was a trip over to Oregon to manifest destiny, which basically means we're American, let's take this land because it's ours.
Yeah.
Terrible in retrospect. Though accurate again in that you had lots of families where it'd be mom, dad, sister, brother, grandpa would go out and maybe one of them would survive sometimes. That's where you have stories like the Donner Party and all sorts of other horrific stories that would occur.
Well,
which is also why it makes you pick which month you leave so that when you leave, you're not in the midst of winter when you get there.
Okay.
So it is, I wouldn't say this game is, well, I'll get more into it, but this game is historically accurate in many aspects, yes.
Okay, that's one of the things I definitely wanted to cover because, as somebody with no nostalgia for the game or very little American history knowledge, I did wonder how much of this was actually true or just some sort of folk tale to scare little children. Because
So-
some of the ways that the game will tell you whether or not you're doing well is by basically saying that the people that you're bringing along, they get sick, they get injured, and they can die.
Yep.
And it is very sort of like on the nose with the way that it tells you this. So
Especially if you're a kid and you name the members, the people of your party after your actual family, then it's like real sad. Yeah, it's kind of messed up. But I was gonna say there actually is like a journal option. You can go the whole game without clicking it, but a journal option where like your characters are apparently journaling what they're feeling, and apparently those are pulled from real journal entries that people had when they were on the Oregon Trail.
I didn't see any of those. Okay,
It's on
I'll
like
go
the
back.
left-hand side. You can go the whole game without clicking it.
Yeah,
It's kind of like
didn't.
yeah, you probably did. All right, so I think we're ready to transition to talking about what we love about this wonderful game.
Yes, let's do that. We'll be back in just a moment. And we're back. This is the Blow on the Cartridge podcast, and we are talking about Oregon Trail, not Persona 3. Not yet, anyway. We are going to take a look now at what we found intriguing and excellent about this very old and timely game. Alex, do you want to set us off in the right direction here?
Sure. So this game is very short, but it's kind of short and sweet in that you don't have to invest a whole lot to have a good time with it. So I brought up that I used to play this at one of my jobs where I just sat in front of a computer, and it was great to kill 20 or 30 minutes. And yeah, if you're playing really quick and not planning stuff out and not like overanalyzing your decisions, your guys might die, but who cares? Just play it again. Like it doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter that much. In terms of being like an educational game, I think kids probably learn something about like planning out maybe a trip and some basic sort of strategy that way. I also want to tag in that in terms of good things about the game, this is probably a lot of people's first step in playing a DOS game. For a lot of people, this might be their first DOS game or even their first computer game, period.
Yeah.
If you grew up in the 90s or you grew up in the late 80s, there's a great chance you didn't have a computer in your house. So if you're playing a game on the computer at school, this may have been your first experience playing a computer game. And as a total introduction to computer gaming, you could do a lot worse than Oregon Trail. You could do a whole lot worse in terms of what it tries to show you when it tries to teach you. Sean, would you like to tag in there?
Yeah, you've said something that I hadn't thought about, which is the fact that it's so short and the fact that it's an educational game meant for kids to play in a computer class at school. These are not coincidences, I don't think.
Oh,
I
no.
think,
Yeah.
but it had never occurred to me. The reason it's so short is because they want kids to be able to play it in a single sitting in a class. And that's
it's in a
pretty
classroom.
excellent.
It's in a classroom where there's only going to be one computer.
Well,
likely.
sometimes. So I wasn't in computer classes in the early 90s. It was the late 90s. But at that point, it was, you had 5 or 10 computers, but they all had the same games on them. So everybody played the same game. And you sat next to your friend, and you could see either you were trying to race to the end or you were trying to see who could get the best deaths. I will say on the educational level, so, the company, the Minnesota Education, it's short and MEC. Yeah. MEC made some other games. You mentioned them. Yukon Trail was one I played as a kid. When I got this game, I actually got it in a bundle with the Yukon Trail. I thought the Yukon Trail was more educational. I definitely don't remember learning a whole lot from this. But, I have no illusions about this game. It's not great, but it does do just enough to be fun. And I think most importantly, because of the length, it doesn't overstay its welcome. For all intents and purposes, this is a visual novel, right? Apart from the hunting minigame, which, Alex, I've got to echo what you said. I could never beat this game in 30 minutes as a kid because I just spent hours hunting. Lots and lots of...
You monsters.
Buffalo.
You monsters.
In this game, you really only need, for the course of the game, probably about 30 or 40 bullets to get from one end to the next.
Yep.
But you can buy up to 1,000, and I always bought 1,000.
Yeah.
So
pause. You can hunt buffalo, which are like 800-pound creatures. Maybe not 800, but like 500 to 600-pound creatures. You can only bring back 200 pounds of food at any given point.
I mean,
but you can shoot as much. You can shoot 3,000 pounds worth of food and just leave it there rotting on the trail, which is weird. That's what people actually did.
There's something to be said about American stereotypes and living up to that, because by the second time I played the game, I bought 50 bullets. And I bought 50 bullets on my second playthrough because I was just like, why can I buy 1,000 bullets? What's going on? Is there some sort of like a bit where I start a war? What's going on here? Like,
no, you don't need them.
No, exactly.
You really don't.
But apart from the hunting minigame, I mean, really, you're just sitting there watching awful things happen to your party of settlers. You make a few decisions, but I mean, there's really much that you can do. Even if there are decisions to make, you really can't control much of the outcome. It all just kind of comes down to the random numbers. And, you know, is the game going to screw you over or not? But I think because of the length, I don't mind it so much. You know, it's like, we've talked in previous episodes, heavy reliance on RNG is frustrating. It's really hard to get invested in a game where if the RNG goes poorly, you're set back 10 or 15 minutes. And I think that length, this was a palate cleanser, especially compared to something like a Persona 3, which is not 20 or 30 minutes to play.
Nope.
It was pleasant. You know, if we all forget about it in 2 weeks, I won't be shocked, but I certainly enjoyed it for the time that I played it.
Me too, actually. Like, I want to say, like, I do have some experience in a management style of game like this. So I played a lot of football management or soccer management games when I was growing up, and those games were lengthy experiences. I actually maxed out the hard drive space on a computer that only had Championship Manager 97, 98 on it. I filled the entire hard drive with I think it ended up being like a 12-year campaign. You know, it covered the space of 12 years on this game. And obviously, I must have spent like 200, 300 hours on this particular like thing. And when something went wrong, I was distraught. I was upset. When it went right, of course, that's the opposite. But the fact that on the Oregon Trail, if something goes wrong, it's just like, oh, well, okay, the stakes are pretty low. You've only invested like 20 minutes time, and then Sean gets like a broken leg and he's dead. Unfortunate as it may be, you can just start again though. So I did very much enjoy the idea of like I can kind of mess around if I want to.
Yeah.
There's not for today's like games of RPGs, they require a lot of investment usually. The fact that you could go into this and just be kind of nonchalant about your investment into it is actually kind of nice.
Well, and that's where, like, sorry, go ahead, Sean.
Well, you mentioned Sean broke his leg and died. So the one thing that I think the game really does smartly is allowing you to name your characters. We talked about in the XCOM episode how much that gives you investment, but I have to share I played the game 4 times. I had 3 mostly good runs, and then I had 1 run that was cursed. And this run, as it turned out, I had named my characters after the 2 of you and some other friends that we have. And on this run, let's see, what happened? We managed to have 2/3 of our oxen stolen right at the beginning. And for those who have not played, oxen are what carry the wagon. Without oxen, you can't move very fast.
How does that even work?
I don't know, but I had 15 oxen and 10 of them were stolen right at the start. Right after that, you get to a river and you can either choose to float your wagon or, to be safe, you pay money and take a ferry across. The ferry sank, which I didn't even know was possible.
Yeah.
So at the first river, one of my characters drowned. The wagon got burned down. Funny enough, I still made it like 80% of the way to Oregon. But I got to say, John got sick and died, or Alex has drowned. It really never stops being funny. And, or if you're not twisted like I am, it does give you an investment. Like I had a playthrough where it was me and my family. And I was extra motivated to make sure that my children did not die of dysentery. And I think that it doesn't take much. It's just that little bit of, it's not your settler died of dysentery. It's your daughter died of dysentery.
Yeah.
And I shouldn't be laughing because it's not funny for those poor settlers. But, in the context of a 20-minute game, it is. It's funny and it's fun.
And that's where, like, I think there is there in the design of this game, there is some depth in terms of, I think, like the strategic planning mechanics of, I'm going to have this much extra oxen. I'm going to make sure I'm going to choose this profession at the beginning of the game, so I have this much money. And I'm going to make sure I have this much food and this many clothes to prevent XYZ thing from occurring or try and mitigate it. So there is something there. It's just, it's hard to almost appreciate, given that it's a short game and it's not that difficult to begin with.
Yeah, no, I agree.
But when you give yourself that this is my daughter, or this is my family, and I don't want anything bad to happen to them, you're going to try and protect them. Where if it's John or I, they can walk fine with a broken leg. What you care?
So in my first playthrough, I obviously didn't understand anything I was doing, and immediately Gareth, a friend of the show, got a broken leg, and I was just like, "Oh, what do I do?" And I just kept going. I didn't realize. I didn't realize that there's a rest.
You can rest and wait so they heal up.
I didn't know, and obviously, that's why like 80% of the game in. Everybody was dead apart from me, and I was just like, "Oh, okay, this is." I mean,
you're on your own.
I'm on my own. I can talk to the oxen, I suppose, but the conversation's not great. Is there anything else we'd like to address before moving on, sirs?
No, I think this is a fun little game for the short amount of time you'll play it.
Okay, well, let's move on to the things that we found frustrating. We'll do that right after this. And welcome back. We are ready to talk about what is frustrating and maybe lacking in Oregon Trail Deluxe. Sean,
I can tell that. Sean, no, I was going to say, I can tell you've got a lot to say.
Me?
Yeah.
Okay, well, we can start with me. That's fine.
Go for it, John.
So, obviously, like, I have no nostalgia or, memories of this game because I played it like maybe a week ago, and that was the first time I'd ever played the Oregon Trail, and it's. I actually liked it for the most part. Thinking about things that that I didn't like about it just kind of fall into place with it being a period piece from its time. It is short because of the way it was designed, obviously, and that was the thing they were going for. It's also very simple. There were times when I would think, well, maybe it would be better if I could, trade, and you can trade in this game. So then I traded, and I looked at I wanted, what was it? I wanted some pieces to repair my wagon, and it's completely random, isn't it? It's completely random how
it's not completely random. There, as the former world record holder, there is like some sort of block. Like if you trade within this amount, you'll always get this amount, like within this amount. So there's some weird mechanics going on.
Okay,
it's not completely random.
So I made a mistake. I played this game in a browser for those who might need to know how I played this game. And I needed what was it? It wasn't the wheel, but there's two other things you can get, isn't there, for fixing the wagon? I forget what they are.
It's the axle, there are wheels, and then there are axles, and there's
the tongue.
The tongue.
Yeah, the tongue.
Yeah. So I needed a tongue, and I tried to get one, and then I made a mistake, and I cancelled out of it, and then okay, well I'll just do that again, and then it just said like nobody has one. I'm just like, well, hang on, what happened in the 2 seconds between like me canceling out?
You gotta keep clicking it. You gotta keep clicking it. If it says nobody has one, that doesn't mean they don't actually have it. You just gotta keep going to different people.
Well,
this is what we expect from quality games: is that you have to keep clicking in order to make it happen. That's what good games do.
Yeah, so there is obviously some downfalls in the negotiations of trade. I mean, that isn't something we really covered so far in our podcast, but there is trading available. It never seemed particularly great though. Whenever I tried it, apart from that, there is obviously, the mechanics of shooting and the rafting that's at the end of the game. What's the other option, by the way? I always chose to raft.
So you don't have to raft. You can just opt to like keep going on the trail, and it takes you longer through like a fort and stuff. But then you don't have to do the raft mini game at all.
Maybe I
the
should have
raft,
done that.
The raft mini game is a shortcut to the end of the game, basically.
Oh, okay. So apart from those two particular like changes of mechanics, there's nothing else going on. You're just looking at screens at that point and making some decisions. So there are obviously, like you say, it's a short game, but for a long part of it, you're just kind of watching your guys and clapping your hands together, hoping that nobody breaks their leg on the way. That's kind of it, really.
I think that's the biggest problem the game has is, are the characters going to break their legs or not? Again, this is an inoffensive game, but it's really just a bunch of dice rolls. There's really no interaction. And so it's funny if you can keep yourself detached, but like for a game, pretty dumb. The fact is that I had one playthrough where at the beginning of the game, a thief came and stole 2/3 of my ox and the run was over. I had another run where a thief came in and he stole one bullet. And it's just not good design. Like, it's random, I get it. And again, it was fun, it was funny, but objectively, that's terrible. And I guess Oregon Trail's kind of like a roguelike because, everything is randomized. The map's not randomized, but all of the events are. Like, you talk about Gareth broke his leg, somebody gets dysentery. There's nothing you can do that actually makes that happen. I guess if you're not feeding your people well, or if you're not resting enough, it's more likely to happen, but ultimately it's just random. And so, in a good roguelike, A, you can kind of do things to control the randomness, or B, you can do things to react to it. And in Oregon Trail, you kind of just have to take it. You're not totally helpless. You can hunt for food, you can trade, like you said, you can rest, but mostly you just kind of have to hope that you don't get the random assortment of bad things. And it's really, even then, like Alex said, this is a super easy game, but you can make the game more difficult by picking characters that start with less money. So if you start as a doctor is easy mode, you've got lots of money, the characters hardly get sick. But of course, you want to challenge yourself. So I know Alex did this, I did this, we played as the teacher, which is the, quote, hardest version of the game. And really what it just comes down to at that point is you have so little money that unless you manipulate the arbitrage that is inherent in the game, and Alex will probably talk about this in a moment, where you can actually manipulate the system to get infinite money. If you're not doing that, which I didn't, if you play as the teacher and the dice rolls are wrong, game's over. And again, it's 10 or 15 minutes, but objectively, if you have a game where they just choose to give you dice rolls and you can't win, or you really can't win without being a total slog, like, again, I'm not going to pretend it's anything other than that's a pretty lousy design.
So I'd just like to point out, so at the beginning of the game, you get to choose the role that your character has. And I actually chose that based on what I thought would be the best when we got there. So I picked farmer. But I had no, previous knowledge of the game.
Farmer's like second hardest, I think.
Yeah, so I just went in thinking, well, hang on, what good is a banker when I get to where I'm going? Like, there's no banks out there. I need somebody who's going to make crops. So I picked a farmer. So I was just making it harder for myself.
John, disappointed.
I just made it harder for myself. I was thinking about the long game. That's what that was.
So yes, for anyone who tries this game afterwards, just like in real life, playing as a teacher is hard mode. No, I don't disagree with anything you all have said. What I would say is that this game is fun for 30 minutes, and it's fun for about 30 minutes. I mentioned playing this game as part of my job, just for fun. And after that, I immediately moved to SimCity 2000 and never, ever really came back to this game except for once in a blue moon to try and fiddle with my high score, so there are trading mechanics and it's kind of complicated, but basically you can, if you start out as a teacher, which has a high score multiplier at the end of the game, at the beginning you trade, like if you buy a certain amount you want to buy all the oxen clothes you can, because those traded for a lot of money. You want to trade them for $800 and then buy back as much as you traded for $700. And so you keep doing that over and over again. So you keep accruing money. if you wanted to, you could do this as much as you want. Which, if you're at a job where you're making $12 an hour after college, in college, then you're there for about 3 to 4 hours in the afternoon, you might just say, "What the hell? I'm going to see as high as I can go."
The problem with that is, though, that there are many other browser games that are much more advanced by now.
You don't actually, let me be clear, you don't actually want to do this. There are 1,000 better games you can play, especially now on your phone. When I did this, it was like 2012. I mean, which granted, smartphones were a thing, but they weren't as much of a thing, and I wasn't supposed to be on my phone when I played this. That said, there's just not a lot of depth to it. And that doesn't necessarily make it bad. I'm not saying every game has to have a lot of depth. But when you can beat the whole game in 30 minutes and there's not that much to go back to, then you're good. And so I wouldn't say it makes it bad, but there's not a lot to it. It's kind of like a fun-sized candy bar. You're done afterwards.
Okay. Is there anything else anyone would like to add before we move on?
No.
Nah.
This game is so very, very short that there's really not much else to say.
Nothing to go into.
All right, so we'll be back after these messages. And welcome back. You're listening to the Blow on the Cartridge podcast, and we are talking about Oregon Trail and how we would make it better, or a better experience. There is a question I'd actually like to ask Sean and Alex before we start, actually. So, knowing next to nothing about this game, I'm actually interested, do they still make this game? Are they still reiterating it now?
I can answer that since I did research. So this game actually has been released as a freemium game on smartphones. Let me pull up my notes here. The last release was on the release on the Apple Arcade, just called The Oregon Trail, but it has other versions called The Oregon Trail Journey to Willamette Valley. There was a handheld device in 2018 release. There was a card game release in 2016. So the brand Oregon Trail is still relatively popular. It doesn't belong, like, it's not associated with Apple, like, beyond being on the App Store.
Yeah.
At this point. But there's still like a big following. There's a musical based on the game, The Oregon Trail, not the actual Oregon Trail.
Yeah.
A musical base where audience members shout out the name of the characters at the beginning of the show, and those are the character names in the musical.
So Buzz Lightyear can break his leg and get dysentery.
Piece of trivia for you.
Yeah. Okay.
That's great.
All right. Well, because obviously, normally in these sections we would discuss like what we would make better. But if the game is still being made, there's a good chance that anything we suggest actually is implemented in these more recent versions, isn't there?
Yes.
Yeah. And so there's a couple of things that I was thinking about as I was working on getting ready for this episode. And you're right. I know for a fact that my two suggestions are in the sequels. But keeping in mind, this was a PC game in the 80s, and it was an educational game. Like, what could you have reasonably added? And the answer is not much. A couple of things. And this is the first one, and this is definitely in other parts of the Oregon Trail games. If you get to the sequels, they really blow out and expand on how many things you can buy. So, like, it's weird to me that in this game you can buy 3 kinds of wagon parts.
Yeah.
But you can't buy medicine.
No.
Or like one of the big random dice rolls that happens in this game a lot is food spoilage. But you can't buy salt. Like those are really simple things of what if I could buy items to reduce the chances of these bad things happening to me that I'm surprised that you can't do. There's a big part of the game is that your ox might get sick or might not have food. What if I could bring hay? I think that's the first thing that jumps out. And I know the sequels do that. The sequels do give you, I think in a lot of ways, you get into analysis paralysis because there's like 60 or 70 things that you can buy. And I know as a kid, I played the second Oregon Trail and went right back to the first one because I did not have the patience for trying to figure out, should I buy bacon or should I buy canned beans or should I buy, like, it was too much for me to try and figure out of the 15 different kinds of food, which one I should buy. It's much easier to just buy food.
So I actually have another question as well, actually, because there were definitely sections where I didn't understand the consequences of. I understood the consequences of the oxen having no grass, or there's no water, or there's bad water in real life. But how do those affect the characters going forwards? Because it kind of felt a lot like I would get a note saying no water, and I'm just like, well, okay, what do I do about that? Nothing. I just pray. I just sit there and I pray nothing bad happens. Is there anything that I could have done, knowing
no, not in this game.
No.
So I think mechanically, what's funny, I don't know this for a fact, but based on my experience with the game, I think that those types of bad situations, they lower the invisible counter of your character's health.
Yeah.
From good to fair to bad to very bad. But what's funny, the way to fix that is to rest. So within the logic of the game, the way to solve a poor health due to bad water or no water is to rest at that place with no water or bad water for a week, and then you'll get better.
Yeah.
So it's a mechanics thing, but I think that's more or less how it works. So the game doesn't really think that through all that well.
If you really want, because he's right, it does lower the counter, but another strategy to dealing with this that might be more reasonable is you increase your pace. So if you go faster to get to good water, which is something that people might actually have done, that makes more sense than staying in one place with the bad water. But either way will fix it.
Sorry, just to me, Jan, it just seemed like Sean is being reasonable and you're being Amazon right now. Because Sean is suggesting rest, and you're just suggesting just go faster, just do it faster.
Well, I mean, because in real life, if you're if you're on a trail and you're near bad water, you should go someplace with good water.
Okay. Yeah, so I would have to agree with Alex on this one. Staying in a place with no water is not the way to solve no water.
In my head, though,
it doesn't make sense. Now, Sean's way works in the game, but in real life and mechanically, it wouldn't make any sense. Mm-hmm. Whereas if it's like, hey, let's press on, like that's a real discussion that may have been had at some point.
Yeah.
Right. The other thing I did think of, and again, I know the future games do this, and this is probably stretching what an 80s game could do, but I think the other thing that the game could give would be a little bit more control of the navigation. Like, what if, here's a big random thing that can happen in this game. Your character gets lost. And getting lost is bad. You end up wasting 10 days not being able to go anywhere. You can't hunt. You can't do anything. So, like, you can run out of food. People can get sick. But I didn't get myself lost. It's not my fault. The game just decided that I was lost. But, I'm trying to picture the old Apple II black and green screen if you could do navigation. I don't know that you could, but I'm just trying to think, like, if you were picking paths, like maybe you picked the path that led to bad water. It's your own fault. Or maybe you can see further ahead and you can see that there's grass. And so to Alex's point, all right, I'm just going to try to press on through and get to the area with good grass. I also think this starts to sound like Euro Truck Simulator, which is not my taste. I know some people really like being bored for 3 hours driving a truck, but it's anyway. I don't know that makes the game better. I don't know that making the game more boring makes it better, but it certainly makes it more interactive.
So I'm going to interject with what I think would make this game ideal and still keep the educational vein. And that isn't necessarily something they did in the sequels, because I played the sequels as well. So have either of you ever played I say played. Have you all ever read like a lone wolf novel or like a choose your own adventure book?
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think it would have worked out. And in the Lone Wolf series, at the beginning of the book, you have your supplies and you have, your abilities and what you can do. And then to choose your own adventure. So you get to a page where say, if you, in this case, this is like more fantasy, but like, if you have a bow and arrow, turn to page 62. If you don't, turn to page 87. And I think the Oregon Trail would have worked really well if it was almost visual novel, but in the sense that, you've been on the trail for 3 days. You're getting hungry. If you have extra food, click this button. If you have a weapon to hunt more food, click this button. If you don't have either, click this button. and then you have the option, and it sends you down that route, that path of, okay, well, I had extra food, so 3 days without food, no big deal, whatever. I had a rifle, so I could hunt for more food, no big deal. I didn't plan very well, and now I'm dead 6 weeks out from my initial starting point. Time travels very fast in this game for our friends who haven't played it.
Yeah.
So I think that's the route I would have gone to make it a bit more unique, a bit educational, and still in the confines of maybe short enough for you to beat in 30 minutes. Go on, John. I can see you have a point to make.
I have 2 points. First of all, hands up if you cheated in those Choose Your Own Adventure books. Alex is lying.
I would say cheated is not the word I would use. I always bookmarked the choice, read until I died, and then went back to the bookmark. If that's cheating, then yeah, I definitely did that.
I did that too. Second of all, I think what you're describing is basically Zork. Because Zork was available back then. Zork is pre.
Well, and that's kind of what I was thinking of, because I know it would be possible technology.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe, and so it would be Zork, but with a few more details.
Yeah.
Maybe a bit more linear, like a bit more boxed in. So it's not Zork would be a lot for a 7-year-old or 8-year-old to handle.
Oh, definitely. But I mean, there are definitely kids. I definitely tried some of those particular Choose Your Own Adventure games.
I think if you boxed it in a little bit, if you made it a little bit more linear to where instead of having any choice of there's a tree, you click what you want to do to it. It's here are 3 options based on what you have available to you.
I think the biggest differences between those, though, is that Oregon Trail has like a foreseeable ending, whereas whenever I played Zork as a kid or anything like that, it was a fun thing to mess around with, but I never finished it because it was so inexplicably large, and the logic gaps in my head as a child were just, I couldn't fathom what it was asking of me. So
also the logic gaps from some 1980s adventure games were they're pretty big leaps there, pretty big chasms.
Yeah.
For our listeners, John would actually like to do Zork in a future episode, or is bandying about the idea of Zork in a future episode. He's mentioned it once or twice. So feel free to reach out to us if you'd like to hear that. I don't know that I want to subject us to that, but it's on the table.
Where's this come from? What?
No.
We're not doing that.
Well, maybe not. Maybe we were just discussing it in terms of, things could be worse, at least they're not Zork.
I'll do Zork if we can do Final Fantasy X.
Moving swiftly on. All right.
Speaking of visual novels, what's our next episode going to be, John?
It's going to be Persona 3 Portable, guys. We moved it on to be a little bit closer to the upcoming re-release of Persona 5 Royal and the other Persona 4 and 3 that are going to be coming to Steam and the Switch and Game Pass and Xbox. It's going to be a big re-release of those games. It's going to be an important time for Persona fans. And
Persona 5 coming out in October and 4 and 3 coming out in next year, but they are coming out for all the systems.
Yeah. And we're going to celebrate that by talking about Persona 3 Portable, which we've discussed on the last episode a little bit. Is kind of a contentious issue for myself and Alex.
We're having some as he might say, controversy. How do you say controversy in your language?
We say controversy. I know it's difficult for you to say.
You say a different way. Do we recommend Oregon Trail Deluxe to our fans and listeners and well-wishers?
You know what? As somebody who hasn't played it before, and if you have like half an hour to kill, yes, I think
that's kind of my attitude. If you are at a computer and have half an hour or nothing else to do, give it a try. There are a lot worse things you could do.
Exactly. Yeah. Sean, how do you feel?
Oh, absolutely. Play it once. Don't play it twice.
Yeah, you don't need to play it again. I'm going to be real honest with you guys. I played it one time for this show, and I had to pull myself through that.
Okay. Well, that's going to do it for today's show. If there's anything else, gents, that we should bring up before we leave? Nobody saying anything. Excellent. Okay, so that's going to do it until 2 weeks' time when we talk about Persona 3 Portable. We'll see everybody again soon. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.